A single decision can shatter a life of perfect order. For billionaire Adrian Davenport, that decision came on a Tuesday afternoon. He was a man who measured his life in stock prices and corporate takeovers, a man who hadn't felt a genuine human connection in a decade. He thought he had everything under control. But in the serene quiet of Regent's Crest Park, he found something that couldn't be quantified on a balance sheet, a young woman barely clinging to life, surrounded by the impossible reality of 3 silent, bundled infants. What he did next would not only defy his own cold logic, but would unleash a storm that threatened to destroy them all. Adrian Davenport's world was a symphony of controlled variables. His days were partitioned into precise 15-minute intervals, managed by an assistant he hadn't seen in person in 6 months. His mansion, a monolith of glass and grey stone, known as Greystone Manor, hummed with the silent efficiency of a supercomputer. Even his emotions were assets to be managed, liabilities to be mitigated. Grief, he had learned after the sudden death of his parents years ago, was an unproductive state. Love was a volatile investment. He preferred the clean, predictable lines of code and the ruthless certainty of the market. His one concession to chaos was a daily solitary drive through Regent's Crest Park. It was a ritual, a 30-minute decompression cycle between the abstract battlefield of global finance and the sterile comfort of his home. On this particular Tuesday afternoon in late August, the air was thick with the promise of an evening storm. The sky was a bruised purple, and the usual gaggle of nannies and joggers had long since scattered. It was the unnatural stillness that first snagged his attention. Beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient oak tree, a splash of pale blue fabric lay unnervingly still against the vibrant green of the manicured lawn. It was the wrong kind of stillness. Not peaceful, but collapsed. Adrian slowed his custom-built sedan, the electric engine's whisper the only sound. His mind, trained to spot anomalies in market data, registered the scene in cold, analytical flashes. Object 1, female, young adult, prone position. Additional objects, 3 small white bundles arranged beside her. Threat assessment, low. Probability of public disturbance, moderate. His first instinct was to drive on, call security. Delegate! That was the Davenport way. His head of household, Walter, could handle it. The police could handle it. It was not his problem. He pressed his foot lightly on the accelerator, but his eyes caught a detail that short-circuited his logic. A small, pale hand, its fingers curled loosely, had fallen from one of the bundles. It was impossibly tiny. A doll's hand. Except it wasn't a doll. Adrian's own hands tightened on the steering wheel. He stopped the car. For a full 10 seconds he sat there, a war raging within him. The meticulously constructed walls of his detachment were being assaulted by a primal, unwelcome flicker of something. Concern, responsibility. He couldn't name it, and he hated it. With a curse that was sharp and quiet, he opened the car door. The humid air clung to him as he walked across the grass, his expensive leather shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. As he got closer, the scene resolved into a devastatingly clear picture. The woman was young, perhaps in her early 20s. Her face was gaunt, with cheekbones as sharp as blades beneath translucent skin. Dark circles were smudged beneath her closed eyes, and her lips had a bluish tint. Her simple blue dress was worn but clean. One of her arms was flung protectively over the 3 swaddled babies, as if, even in unconsciousness, her body knew its duty. The babies, they were identical. Triplets. He knelt his knee, pressing into the damp ground, ignoring the ruin of his $1,000 trousers. He cautiously reached out and touched the cheek of the nearest infant. The skin was cool, but not cold. A faint, shallow breath ghosted against his fingers. He checked the other two. The same. Alive, but barely. He looked back at the woman. Her breathing was just as shallow. Malnutrition? Dehydration. His mind raced, shifting from risk assessment to crisis management. Calling an ambulance was the logical choice, but it would mean police social services questions. The image of these 3 fragile lives being scattered into the bureaucratic winds of the foster care system sparked another unwelcome emotion: protectiveness. It was an insane, irrational impulse. It violated every rule he lived by. He pulled out his phone. He didn't dial 911, he dialed Walter. Sir Walter's voice was, as always, a calm baritone. "Walter, I need you to do 3 things immediately. First, call Dr. Anne Carmichael. Tell her it's a pediatric emergency at the manor. Tell her to be discreet and bring equipment for 3 newborns. Second, I need you to prepare the lilac suite. Full nursery setup, cribs, formula, everything. Use the corporate account for same-day delivery. I don't care what it costs." Third, Adrian hesitated, the absurdity of his own words striking him. "Open the front gates. I'm coming in now, and I have guests." There was a beat of silence on the other end, the only time in 15 years Adrian had ever heard Walter hesitate. "Sir, may I ask who the guests are?" Adrian looked down at the pale, still faces. The woman and 3 infants who had, in the span of 5 minutes, completely derailed his universe. "I have absolutely no idea, Walter." He ended the call. Carefully, with a gentleness that felt alien to him, he gathered the first baby into his arms. It was shockingly light. He carried it to the car, placing it securely on the plush leather of the passenger seat. He went back for the second, then the third. Finally, he returned for the woman. As he lifted her, her head lolled against his shoulder. She weighed next to nothing. A scent of rain and desperation clung to her. As he laid her across the back seat, a small, worn leather wallet slipped from a pocket in her dress and fell onto the floor mat. He picked it up. Inside there was no money, just a single dog-eared photo of the 3 babies sleeping and a driver's license. The name on the license was Nina Petrov. The address was a non-existent street number in a town he'd never heard of. He drove through the now open gates of Greystone Manor, the storm finally breaking overhead. Rain hammered against the windshield, washing the world clean. But Adrian Davenport knew with a chilling certainty that he had just driven a storm directly into the heart of his perfectly ordered life. Nina's first sensation was of softness, an impossible decadent softness that seemed to soak into her bones. She was floating on a cloud, a sensation so foreign after months of sleeping on lumpy mattresses and park benches that her mind immediately rejected it. It had to be a dream. The second sensation was the scent. Not the metallic tang of city rain or the sour smell of fear, but something clean and faintly floral like lavender and expensive linen. Her eyes fluttered open. She wasn't on a cloud. She was in a bed, a monstrously large bed, with a headboard that seemed to stretch to the ceiling. The ceiling itself was a canvas of intricate plasterwork. The room was vast, bathed in the soft grey light, filtering through towering windows. The furniture was dark polished wood. The walls were a calming shade of lilac. It was like waking up inside a jewelry box. Panic seized her with the icy grip of a fist around her heart. The babies. She threw back the impossibly heavy silk comforter and tried to sit up. A wave of dizziness crashed over her, and the room tilted violently. A sharp pain shot through her arm where an IV needle was expertly taped to her skin, a clear bag of fluid hanging from a silver stand beside the bed. "Easy now. You're all right." The voice was deep, calm, and resonant. It came from a man standing near the window, his silhouette framed by the rainy afternoon. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark suit that probably cost more than every possession she'd ever owned combined. His face was sharp angles and shadows, his expression unreadable. Nina shrank back against the pillows. Where are my babies? Where are Noah, Owen, and Chloe? Her voice was a raw, croaking thing. They are safe, the man said, his tone leaving no room for argument. They are in the adjoining room. They have been seen by a pediatrician. They have been fed. They are sleeping. Relief washed over her so intensely it left her weak, but it was immediately followed by a fresh wave of suspicion. Who was this man? Why was she here? People like him didn't help people like her without a price. Who are you? What do you want? She demanded, trying to inject strength into her voice. My name is Adrian Davenport, and what I want is to understand why I found you and 3 infants unconscious in a public park. He took a step forward, and for the first time she saw his eyes. They were a startlingly clear shade of grey, like a winter sky, and they held the cold, penetrating gaze of a predator. Before she could answer, an older gentleman in a simple, well-tailored grey uniform entered the room. He had kind eyes and a gentle demeanour that stood in stark contrast to the man by the window. He carried a tray with a bowl of soup and a glass of water. Miss Petrov, the older man said with a warm, reassuring smile. My name is Walter. I'm the household manager. Dr. Carmichael said you need to get your strength back. This is a simple vegetable broth. He placed the tray on a table beside the bed. Nina stared at him, then back at Adrian Davenport. The juxtaposition of the 2 men was disorienting. One offered comfort, the other scrutiny. I don't understand, she whispered. There isn't much to understand, Adrian said, his voice cutting through Walter's gentle presence. You collapsed. I brought you here. A doctor has attended to you and your children. You were suffering from severe dehydration and malnutrition. So were they. Each sentence was a clinical observation, a statement of fact devoid of emotion. He might as well have been describing a faulty piece of machinery. Why, Nina asked, her voice trembling. Why would you do that? People don't just... I don't just... He corrected her. Let's be clear, Miss Petrov. This is an anomaly, a deviation from my routine that I intend to correct as quickly as possible. Once you are stable, and I have assurances that you are not a threat to yourself or your children, arrangements will be made. Arrangements. The word sounded ominous. What kind of arrangements? That depends entirely on the answers you provide, he said, his gaze unwavering. Your ID says your name is Nina Petrov. The address is fraudulent. You have no money, no phone, no keys. You have 3 6-month-old infants who are dangerously underweight. So you will start from the beginning, and you will tell me everything. Nina's heart hammered against her ribs. Tell him everything. Tell this cold, powerful stranger about Ivan. About the gilded cage she'd escaped from. About the life of terror she'd been running from for months. Telling him would be signing her own death warrant, and worse, the death warrant of her children. Ivan Morozov had eyes and ears everywhere. A man like Adrian Davenport, with his obvious wealth, would be a blip on Ivan's radar, but a conspicuous one. Involving him would be like lighting a flare in the darkness. She looked at his unyielding face and made a decision. She would give him a piece of the truth, a version he could accept. Their father, she began, her voice low and raspy. He left. He lost his job, everything. We had nothing. I came to the city looking for work for a shelter, but they're all full. There's no room for a woman with 3 babies. I haven't eaten in 2 days. I was just so tired. It was a plausible story, a tragically common one. She watched Adrian's face, looking for any sign that he believed her. His expression didn't change, but a muscle feathered in his jaw. And the father's name he pressed. "It doesn't matter," she said quickly. "He's gone. It's just me and them now." Adrian was silent for a long moment, his grey eyes seeming to peer right through her carefully constructed lies. She felt like a specimen under a microscope. Walter Adrian said, turning to the older man, "Stay with Miss Petrov. See that she eats. I'll be in my office." He turned and left the room without another word, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet. The air in the room seemed to warm by several degrees with his absence. Walter pulled a chair closer to the bed. "He's not as cold as he appears, my dear," he said softly. "His world just doesn't have much room for surprises." Nina looked at the steaming bowl of soup. Her stomach churned with a hunger so profound it was painful. She picked up the spoon with a trembling hand. "Can I see them?" she asked, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Please, I just need to see them." "Of course," Walter said, his smile genuine. "Finish your soup, then I'll take you to them myself. They're sleeping like little angels." As Nina ate the soup, each spoonful a small miracle of warmth and flavor, she knew she was in a dangerous position. She had traded one cage for another. This one was gilded with silk sheets and the kindness of an old man, but it was a cage, nonetheless, presided over by a warden with eyes like ice. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the monster she was running from would not stop looking for her. He would tear this world apart to find his property, her children. She had escaped a nightmare, only to wake up in a precarious, beautiful, and terrifying dream. The days that followed bled into one another in a haze of structured care that was both a comfort and a torment to Nina. Greystone Manor operated with the quiet precision of a luxury hospital. Walter, it turned out, was a master of logistics. Within hours of their arrival, the adjoining lilac suite had been transformed into a state-of-the-art nursery. 3 identical mahogany cribs stood in a neat row, each with a mobile of softly glowing stars. A diaper-changing station was stocked with every conceivable cream and powder. A small refrigerator hummed, filled with rows of nutrient-rich formula prescribed by Dr. Carmichael. Dr. Carmichael herself was a whirlwind of brisk efficiency and warm smiles. She visited daily, monitoring the triplets' weight gain with a satisfaction that Nina found deeply reassuring. Noah, the most observant of the 3, was the first to start thriving. Owen, the grumpiest, began to fill out his frowns, becoming less frequent. And little Chloe, always the smallest, finally began to hold her own, her tiny fists uncurling in sleep. Nina's life became a cycle of feeding, changing, and sleeping. For the first time in months, she slept without one ear open for the sound of a door being forced or footsteps in a dark alley. But the fear was a phantom limb. She still felt its ache. She rarely left the 2-room suite, a self-imposed prison within a gilded cage. Adrian Davenport was a ghost. She would hear the distant hum of his car leaving in the morning and returning late at night. He never entered her rooms, but she felt his presence everywhere in the endless supply of diapers. The gourmet meals that appeared outside her door, the quiet hum of the mansion's advanced security system. He was an invisible benefactor, a silent observer. One evening, about a week after her arrival, she was rocking Chloe, who was fussing with a low-grade fever from her first round of vaccinations. Nina was humming a lullaby, a mournful, half-remembered tune from her own childhood, when a shadow fell across the doorway. It was Adrian. He wasn't in a suit, but in dark trousers and a simple grey cashmere sweater. It made him look younger, less like a corporate titan, and more like a man. He didn't say anything, just stood there watching her. Nina's hands tensed on her daughter. "I'm sorry, is she disturbing you?" she asked, her voice hushed. He finally moved, stepping fully into the nursery. The room, always so warm and full of life, seemed to cool in his presence. "No," I heard the crying. He walked over to the crib and looked down at Chloe. His face was a mask of detached curiosity. The doctor said this was to be expected. A mild reaction. "She just wants to be held," Nina said softly. He looked from Chloe's flushed face to Nina's tired one. An unreadable expression flickered in his eyes. "You look exhausted." "I'm a mother of triplets," she replied, a faint, wry smile touching her lips for the first time. "Exhaustion is my natural state." The small smile seemed to surprise him. He continued to watch her, his silence unnerving. He was like a scientist studying a new life form. "Walter tells me you don't leave these rooms," he stated. "Everything I need is here. The estate has 12 acres of gardens. The air would be good for you. And for them." The thought of going outside, of being visible, sent a spike of pure adrenaline through her. "We're fine in here." His gaze sharpened. "What are you so afraid of, Nina?" The direct question hung in the air between them. Her carefully constructed story about a deadbeat boyfriend felt flimsy and pathetic under that intense stare. She looked down at Chloe, her thumb stroking the baby's soft cheek. "The world isn't a kind place for a woman on her own," she deflected. Adrian didn't push. Instead, he did something that shocked her more than any question could have. He reached out a hesitant hand, his long, elegant fingers hovering for a moment before gently touching Chloe's head. His touch was tentative, as if he expected her to shatter. At that exact moment, Chloe, who had been on the verge of a full-blown wail, stopped fussing. Her big blue eyes, still misty with tears, blinked up at the imposing figure above her. And then a tiny, slow, gummy smile spread across her face. It was a small thing. A reflex, perhaps. But in the quiet of the nursery, it felt like a seismic event. Nina watched Adrian's face. The change was subtle, but it was there. The hard line of his mouth softened. The ice in his grey eyes seemed to thaw for just an instant. A crack appeared in the granite facade, a flicker of something profoundly human and unguarded. He pulled his hand back quickly as if burned. He cleared his throat the moment broken. "Walter has ordered a set of advanced baby monitors. They have video and biometric tracking. They can be linked to your phone and to the main house system. You'll be able to watch them from anywhere on the property." He was back to business, to technology and solutions. "That's very generous," Nina managed to say, her heart still beating a little faster. "It's practical," he corrected, his walls firmly back in place. "Rest is a necessary component of recovery." He turned to leave but paused in the doorway. "The story you told me," he said, not looking at her. "About their father. It's full of holes. I ran a background check on you, Nina Petrov. As I told you, the name exists, but the life you've attached to it doesn't. There are no records, no credit history, no digital footprint to speak of. You're a ghost." Nina's blood ran cold. "When you're ready to tell me who you're really running from," he continued, his voice low and serious, "I might actually be able to help you. Until then, you are a guest in my home. But make no mistake, you are also a liability I am actively managing." He left, leaving Nina alone with the sleeping baby in her arms. The warmth of the moment had vanished, replaced by a chilling realization. She had underestimated him. He wasn't just a cold, rich man. He was intelligent, resourceful, and deeply suspicious. He knew she was lying. And the small human connection she'd witnessed, that fleeting moment of warmth sparked by her daughter's smile, was a double-edged sword. It meant he might be capable of empathy, but it also meant he was becoming invested. And if Adrian Davenport got invested, he would dig for the truth. And the truth, Nina knew, would bring Ivan Morozov and his entire world of violence crashing down on this beautiful, silent, and fragile sanctuary. The name Ivan Morozov was never spoken aloud in the circles he moved in. It was a whisper in gilded boardrooms, a cold dread in the hearts of his rivals. He was a man who had built an empire on the ruins of others, a predator who wore bespoke suits and a charming smile. His business dealings were a labyrinth of shell corporations and brutal tactics, but his public persona was that of a reclusive, enigmatic investor. His greatest prize, however, was not a company or a contract. It was the legacy he intended to build. When he'd learned his former lover, a beautiful but naive girl named Nina, was carrying not one, but 3 potential heirs, he'd seen it as destiny. His sons, his dynasty. He had already planned their lives, the best schools, the most ruthless tutors and upbringing that would forge them into weapons to wield in his world. Nina, with her talk of love and a normal life, had been an obstacle, a beautiful vessel that had outlived its purpose. He had intended to keep her, of course, a pretty ornament confined to one of his many properties, allowed to see the children on his terms. But she had run. 6 months ago, she had vanished from a private maternity clinic in Switzerland, with his children aided by a sympathetic nurse who had been paid for her silence with her life. Ivan's rage had been biblical. It was not a crime of passion. It was a theft of assets. He had unleashed the full, terrifying force of his resources to find them. Investigators, informants, hackers, a private army scouring continents. For months, there was nothing. Nina was smarter and more resilient than he had anticipated. She'd moved through the underbelly of Europe, using cash, staying in hostels, and shelters never remaining in one place for more than a few days. Then a flicker. A credit card stolen and used to buy a train ticket to the American East Coast. A grainy CCTV image of a woman huddled with 3 bundles at a bus station. And then a week ago, a hit. A facial recognition program cross-referencing thousands of public and private cameras flagged a potential match. A woman fainting in Regent's Crest Park. The image was taken from a high-altitude traffic camera, the quality poor. But the subsequent images were crystal clear. A man. Getting out of a ridiculously expensive custom sedan. A man lifting the woman and her children into his car and driving away. Ivan Morozov watched the footage on a massive screen in his stark, minimalist office overlooking a stormy sea. His chief of security, a former Spetsnaz operative named Dmitri, stood silently by. "Identify him," Ivan commanded, his voice a low growl. The work took his intelligence team less than an hour. The car was registered to a holding company, which was owned by another, which led back to the personal portfolio of one Adrian Davenport. Davenport, Ivan mused, rolling the name around on his tongue. Davenport Innovations, a tech prodigy, net worth estimated 50 billion, a recluse, no family, parents deceased, lives in a fortress he calls Greystone Manor. Dmitri nodded. He is a ghost like her. Very private. His security is said to be state-of-the-art, designed by his own company. Ivan smiled, a chilling, predatory curving of his lips. Excellent. A challenge. She has run from my cage and flown directly into another. A more expensive one, perhaps, but a cage all the same. And every cage has a key. He didn't want a war with Adrian Davenport. War was messy and bad for business. He wanted his property back. Intimidation was the first, most elegant tool. He would show this tech billionaire that he was meddling in affairs far beyond his comprehension. He would make him understand that harboring Nina and the children was a liability he could not afford. Dmitri Ivan said, his eyes fixed on Adrian's face on the screen. "I want to send Mr. Davenport a message. Something personal. Something that tells him he has something that belongs to me. Find out what he values." It took another day. Davenport was a man of few attachments. He didn't collect art or women or yachts. He collected companies. But there was one thing. A small charitable foundation he had set up in his parents' name after their death in a plane crash. The Amelia and George Davenport Foundation for Aeronautical Safety. It was his only visible sentimentality. The message was delivered 2 days later. It arrived at Greystone Manor not as a threat, but as a gift. A large, impeccably wrapped box delivered by a high-end courier. Walter, ever cautious, had it scanned before bringing it into the house. It was clean. He brought it to Adrian in his study. "It's from the Morozov Acquisitions Group," Walter said, his brow furrowed. "The name is unfamiliar." Adrian's eyes narrowed. He didn't know the name either, but it sounded powerful. He sliced the box open with a letter opener. Inside, nestled in black satin, was a stunningly detailed scale model of a private jet. It was an exact replica of the model his parents had been flying when they crashed. Tucked under one of the wings was a small embossed card. Adrian picked it up. The message was typed in simple, clean font. "Some possessions are irreplaceable. I trust you are taking good care of mine." The blood drained from Adrian's face. The implication was as clear as it was terrifying. It wasn't just a threat, it was a demonstration of reach. The sender knew about his parents, about their plane. He had pierced the veil of Adrian's carefully guarded privacy with effortless ease. And he was claiming ownership of Nina and the triplets. At that moment, one of the new high-tech baby monitors on his desk chimed. He glanced at the screen. It was a live feed from the nursery. Nina was sitting in a rocking chair feeding Noah, her face illuminated by the soft nursery light. She looked peaceful, safe. A calm island in the center of the storm that had just broken in his study. He finally understood. This wasn't about a runaway girlfriend. This was about something much, much bigger. He had stumbled into a war, and the opening salvo had just been fired. He buzzed his intercom. "Walter, get Garrett on the line now. Full security lockdown. No one in or out without my direct authorization." He strode out of his study and down the hall to the lilac suite. He pushed the door open without knocking. Nina looked up, startled, a flicker of fear in her eyes at his abrupt entrance. He walked to the center of the room, holding the small embossed card between his fingers. "Nina," he said, his voice low and dangerous, stripped of all its earlier coolness. "The time for lies is over. You are going to tell me right now who Ivan Morozov is." Nina's face went bone-white. The baby bottle slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. The name spoken aloud in the safety of this house was like a curse, a snake slithering into paradise. The ghost of her past had found her. The name hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Nina's carefully constructed dam of lies shattered, and the story poured out of her in a torrent of whispered, terrified words. She told him everything. About meeting Ivan, a charismatic, powerful man who had swept her off her feet. About the suffocating control that followed the isolation, the realization that she was not a partner, but a possession. She told him about the pregnancy, Ivan's obsessive delight, and his chilling plans to raise his sons and daughter, whose gender he always disregarded, as his heirs, molding them in his own ruthless image, cutting her off from them almost entirely. "He doesn't want children," she whispered, tears streaming down her face as she clutched the now fussing Noah to her chest. "He wants assets, a dynasty. He told me their souls were his to shape. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let him turn them into monsters." Adrian listened, his expression hardening into something unreadable. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't a domestic dispute. It was a corporate extraction. Ivan Morozov saw the children as his property, and Nina was the thief. The model jet wasn't just a threat. It was a message from one titan to another. You are in my world now. He will not stop Nina choked out. He will burn down anything and anyone to get to them. We shouldn't be here. We're putting you in danger. He has already brought the danger to my door. Adrian said, his voice a low growl. He looked at the baby monitor on the nursery bureau, at the live feeds of Owen and Chloe, sleeping peacefully in their cribs. He thought of Chloe's smile. He thought of the impossible weight of responsibility he had felt in the park. He thinks he can intimidate me. He thinks I'm a businessman. He's about to find out what happens when my business is protecting its assets. The shift in him was palpable. The detached analytical billionaire was gone, replaced by a cold, focused strategist. Greystone Manor was no longer just a home. It was a fortress, and he was its commander. He brought in Garrett, his head of security, a formidable ex-military man with a quiet, intense demeanor. They convened in Adrian's office, which transformed into a command center. Schematics of the estate were displayed on a massive touch-screen wall. I want a full sweep. Adrian commanded, his voice sharp with authority. Electronic countermeasures, physical patrols. I want to know if a leaf falls on this property without our permission. The perimeter needs to be reinforced. Motion sensors, thermal imaging, drone surveillance. No one gets on or off this estate without my express approval. Our guest and her children are designated Alpha Priority. Their rooms are to be considered a safe room. Under no circumstances are they to be left unguarded. Garrett nodded, his face grim. Already on it. But Adrian, the threat to your parents, that's specific. That's deep intelligence. It suggests an internal leak. Adrian's eyes narrowed. The thought was poison. His staff was small, loyal, and vetted with a rigor that bordered on paranoia. Walter had been with him for 15 years. The rest of the security and household staff were hand-picked by Garrett. A betrayal from within seemed unthinkable. Check them. Adrian ordered, his voice like ice. All of them. Financials, communications, everything. Subtly. I don't want to panic, but I want to know who is talking to whom. Morozov found us too easily. The next 48 hours were a blur of quiet, intense activity. Invisible laser grids were recalibrated. Communications were routed through encrypted servers. The mansion, already a technological fortress, became hermetically sealed. Nina and the children were moved to a more secure suite in the central wing of the house with reinforced walls and windows. Nina felt like a prisoner more than ever. But it was a prison meant to keep the world out, not to keep her in. She watched Adrian on the few occasions she saw him moving with a terrifying purpose. He was no longer her reluctant host. He was her fierce, calculating protector. A strange, unnerving sense of safety began to take root in her heart, even as her fear for him grew. He was making himself Ivan's enemy. A war was being declared, and her family was the territory being fought over. The discovery came on the third day. One of Garrett's cybersecurity analysts, a young genius poached from MIT, found the anomaly. It was a tiny encrypted data packet sent from a burner phone inside the estate's geo-fenced area. It was small, just a few kilobytes, masked as a system update request. But it was outbound, sent to a server that bounced through a dozen countries before terminating in Eastern Europe. It had been sent 2 days before the model jet arrived. We have a location, Garrett said, pointing to a blinking dot on the schematic. Guard post 3 at the west gate. It was sent during the night shift. Who was on duty? Adrian's voice was dangerously calm. Peterson. Young kid. Been with us about a year. Clean record. Adrian and Garrett found Peterson in the staff mess hall, laughing with another guard over a cup of coffee. He was barely 22, with a fresh face and an easy smile. He paled when he saw Adrian and Garrett approaching. They took him to a soundproofed communications room in the sub-basement. There were no threats, no raised voices. Adrian simply sat across a steel table from him and laid a printed transcript of the encrypted data packet on the table. This packet contained the flight details of the Davenport corporate jet from 12 years ago. Adrian said, his voice flat. It also contained a confirmation that Miss Petroff and the children were on the premises. You sent it. I want to know who you sent it to and why. Peterson stared at the paper, his face ashen. He started to stammer out a denial, but the look in Adrian's eyes cut him short. The young guard crumpled. They have my sister. He choked out tears welling in his eyes. She's studying abroad in Prague. They sent me pictures of her. They said they knew her schedule, her apartment, everything. They said if I didn't cooperate, she would disappear. They didn't even want much. Just confirmation. They said they wouldn't hurt anyone here. Adrian listened, his expression a mask of stone. He felt a flicker of pity for the boy, a pawn in a much larger game. But pity was a luxury. Peterson's fear had compromised everything. Who contacted you, a name? A man named Dmitri Peterson whispered. He said he represented Mr. Morozov. Adrian stood up. Garrett, confiscate his credentials. Keep him here. He is not to communicate with anyone. He looked down at the terrified young guard. As for your sister, give me her details. I will see what I can do. He walked out of the room, Garrett following him. What's the play? Garrett asked. The mole is no longer our biggest problem. Adrian said, his mind already 3 steps ahead. The fact that Morozov has compromised my security is. He was testing the waters. He found a weakness. Now he'll press his advantage. He thinks he can just walk in here and take what he wants. He stopped in the corridor, turning to his security chief. Let him try. We know he's coming. We have the mole. But Morozov doesn't know that we know. We're going to let Peterson send one more message. We're going to feed Dmitri false information, a maintenance window for the Westgate's electrical systems, a security rotation change that leaves a blind spot. We are going to invite the fox into the henhouse, and the henhouse is going to be full of traps. Garrett allowed himself a grim smile. I like it. When Adrian looked at his watch. Tonight. The fortress was secure. The mole was caught. But now the war was coming home. Adrian was no longer just defending. He was setting a trap for one of the most dangerous men in the world, right on his own doorstep. The storm that had been threatening for days finally broke with a vengeance that night. Rain lashed against the bulletproof windows of Greystone Manor, and wind howled through the ancient trees, providing the perfect cover for an intrusion. Inside the mansion was deceptively calm, a bastion of quiet light against the raging dark. But beneath the surface, it was a coiled spring. Nina knew something was wrong. Walter had insisted she and the children remain in the suite, bringing them dinner on a tray himself. His usual comforting smile was strained. Garrett had been posted outside her door, his presence a silent, ominous confirmation of the tension in the air. The babies, sensitive to her anxiety, were restless. She could see Adrian on the nursery monitor, which he had temporarily linked to his main system. He was in his office, which now looked like a NORAD command center. He wasn't watching financial data. He was watching dozens of security feeds, his face illuminated by the eerie green and white glow of thermal and night vision displays. He looked like a general on the eve of battle. At 2:17 a.m., a silent alarm tripped on the western perimeter. On Adrian's main screen, 4 figures rendered in ghostly white against the black landscape emerged from the tree line. They moved with the fluid economic grace of trained professionals dressed in black tactical gear that rendered them nearly invisible to the naked eye. "They're taking the bait," Garrett's voice crackled through Adrian's earpiece from his own position in the central security hub. "They're heading for the west gate, just like Peterson's message said." No comms between them, Adrian noted, his eyes scanning the data streams. Military discipline. "They're good. My men are better," Garrett said flatly. The 4 intruders reached the 10-foot-high perimeter wall. As the false intelligence had indicated, the electrical fence atop it was dark. One of them produced a grappling hook, launching it over the wall. They ascended quickly, silently dropping into the gardens on the other side. "Phase 1 trap is a go," Adrian said into his mic. "Activate it." As the last man landed on the soft grass, the ground beneath them erupted, not with a bang, but with a blinding flash of light and a high-frequency sonic pulse. It was a non-lethal system, designed by Davenport Innovations for crowd control, disorienting its targets with sensory overload. The men staggered, clutching their heads, their night vision goggles rendered useless. From the shadows, Garrett's team, clad in their own tactical gear, moved in. The fight was brutal, efficient, and almost completely silent, a deadly ballet of hand-to-hand combat. Within 90 seconds, all 4 intruders were neutralized, bound, and gagged. First wave down, Garrett reported his breathing steady. Too easy. This was a probe, a distraction. Adrian's eyes were already scanning the other feeds. "Where's the real attack?" Suddenly a new alert flashed on his screen. Proximity sensor. The roof. He switched feeds. 2 more figures were rappelling down from the sky, a helicopter, hovering silently far above the storm clouds, its thermal signature masked. They were heading for the one place they might have considered a vulnerability, the massive glass conservatory on the East Wing. East Wing roof. "They're going for the conservatory," Adrian snapped. "My team is on the west side. We're 5 minutes out," Garrett yelled back. "No time," Adrian said. He looked at the schematic. The conservatory was 2 corridors away from the nursery suite. They were already too close. He made a split-second decision. Walter locked down the residential wing. Now. Full steel shutters on all windows and doors. Not a mouse gets in or out. Yes, Sir Walter's calm voice responded instantly. Throughout the mansion, with a low hydraulic hum, heavy steel plates slid down over windows and doorways, sealing off the core of the house. In her suite, Nina jumped as a solid metal door slammed down, locking them in. She was now truly in a safe room. Adrian, however, was not in the safe room. He was in the line of fire. His office was in the wing between the intruders and the nursery. He watched the screen as the 2 men sliced a neat circle out of the conservatory's reinforced glass and dropped inside. They were Dmitri Ivan's formidable chief of security and another operative. They moved with a purpose the first team had lacked. This was the real strike force. Adrian's mind raced. Garrett was on his way, but it would be too late. He had only one active defense left that he could control from his desk. It was experimental, a last resort. He flicked a switch on his console. System override. Activate Protocol Chimera. In the conservatory, Dmitri and his partner began moving toward the main house. As they passed through the archway, the air in front of them began to shimmer like a heat haze. A 3-dimensional image flickered into existence, a perfect holographic projection of Nina holding a baby, cowering in the middle of the corridor ahead. Dmitri froze. He raised his weapon. "Nina," he commanded in Russian, "come with us. Mr. Morozov sent us." The hologram whimpered and backed away. It was the hesitation Adrian needed. While their attention was fixed on the phantom, Nina, from hidden vents in the ceiling, a colorless, odorless gas began to hiss into the corridor. It wasn't poison. It was a fast-acting anesthetic agent, a custom blend developed by one of his company's biomedical subsidiaries. The second operative began to sway, his eyes glazing over. He dropped to his knees with a muffled thud. Dmitri, his instinct screaming, realized the trap. He spun around, pulling a rebreather from his belt, but it was too late. He had already inhaled too much. He fought it, his training warring with the chemical shutting down his nervous system. He managed to stumble a few steps back towards the conservatory, before collapsing, his weapon clattering on the marble floor. In his office, Adrian watched the 2 thermal signatures on his screen fade from bright white to a dull, unconscious blue. He leaned back in his chair, the adrenaline finally hitting him. His heart hammered in his chest. He was a man of numbers and code, not combat. Garrett's voice came through his earpiece, breathless. "We're here. Status threat neutralized," Adrian said, his own voice sounding distant to his ears. "East corridor. 2 targets down. Non-lethal. We have them." He took a deep, shaky breath. "We have them all." The immediate danger was over. The siege had failed. Adrian had used his mind, his technology, to defend his home, to defend the family he had accidentally acquired. He had met Ivan Morozov's brute force with surgical precision. He stood up and walked over to the nursery monitor. Nina was huddled on the floor, clutching all 3 babies, who were now crying from the noise and her distress. She was looking around the sealed room, her face a mask of terror. Adrian keyed the intercom to her suite. "Nina, it's me. It's over. You're safe." Her head snapped up, her eyes finding the small camera in the corner of the room. He saw the question in them, the fear for him. "Everyone is safe." He added, his voice softer than he intended. "The monsters didn't get in. For now." He knew this wasn't the end. It was merely the end of the beginning. He had won the battle, but Ivan Morozov would now be ready for a war. The aftermath of the failed assault was a study in quiet efficiency. Adrian's teams processed the captured intruders, handing them over to a discreet federal contact who was more than interested in Ivan Morozov's unsanctioned paramilitary activities on U.S. soil. The captured men were mercenaries, deniable assets, but their equipment, their biometrics, and their confessions under interrogation were a treasure trove of evidence. Dmitri in particular was a key that could unlock much of Morozov's European operations. But Adrian knew that defeating a man like Ivan required more than just stopping his soldiers. You didn't kill a king by capturing his pawns. You did it by toppling his throne. For the next week, Adrian Davenport disappeared from the world. He didn't leave his office, subsisting on coffee and the meals Walter left by his door. He didn't meet with Nina or the children. He unleashed the full formidable power of Davenport Innovations, not as a security company, but as a financial weapon. He assembled a covert team of his best data analysts and forensic accountants. Their target, Morozov Acquisitions Group. They worked relentlessly, following the digital breadcrumbs, peeling back the layers of shell corporations and exposing the rot at the core of Ivan's empire. They found what the authorities never could: the illegal arms deals hidden in shipping, manifests the money laundering schemes disguised as real estate transactions, the political bribery buried in offshore accounts. Adrian didn't just find the data, he weaponized it. He didn't leak it to the press. That was too chaotic. Instead, he executed a meticulously planned, multi-pronged attack. He anonymously delivered irrefutable proof of sanctions violations to the U.S. Treasury Department. He fed key details of a hostile takeover bid to Morozov's biggest corporate rival in Asia, sparking a stock war. He used his own vast resources to short-sell Morozov's most vulnerable public-facing companies, causing their value to plummet. He orchestrated a digital avalanche, a perfectly timed release of information that triggered audits, froze assets, and unleashed a swarm of international regulators on every corner of Ivan's kingdom. It was a corporate assassination, clean, silent, and utterly devastating. Within 72 hours, Ivan Morozov's empire was hemorrhaging money, his lines of credit were severed, and his political allies were distancing themselves from the unfolding scandal. He was no longer a predator hunting Nina. He was a wounded animal, surrounded by the rivals he had created over a lifetime of ruthless ambition. His power, his focus, his ability to threaten them was gone, consumed by the fight for his own survival. Word came through Adrian's contacts that Ivan had fled to a non-extradition country, his assets frozen, his empire in ruins. On a bright sunny morning, a week after the siege, Adrian finally emerged from his office. He looked exhausted, but his eyes held a look of grim satisfaction. He found Nina in the gardens. The steel shutters had been raised, and for the first time, she had felt safe enough to take the triplets outside. She had laid a blanket on the grass near a rose garden, and Noah, Owen, and Chloe were lying on their backs, batting at the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. Nina was watching them, a genuine, unguarded smile on her face. She looked up as he approached, her expression a mixture of gratitude and awe. "It's over, isn't it?" she said softly. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Adrian confirmed. "He won't be a threat to you again. To anyone." She stood up, her eyes searching his. "Thank you. There are no words to thank you, Adrian." He looked from her face to the 3 babies gurgling on the blanket. He thought of his life before them, a sterile, empty world of numbers and acquisitions. He had built an empire of technology and finance, a kingdom of cold, hard assets. But here, on this simple blanket, was a different kind of empire. A small, fragile, and infinitely more valuable one. "You and the children are free to go, of course," he said, the words feeling formal and wrong in his mouth. "I can set you up with a new identity, a home, anything you need. You will be financially secure for the rest of your lives." Nina looked at him, and for the first time he saw not fear or desperation in her eyes, but a quiet strength. "And where would we go?" she asked. "In the past few weeks, this place, you, have been the only home we've ever really known, the only safety." An unfamiliar warmth spread through Adrian's chest. It was a terrifying, exhilarating sensation. He knelt on the grass, his expensive suit forgotten, and reached out a hand to one of the babies, Owen. The little boy, who was usually so serious, grabbed his finger with a surprisingly strong grip and held on. Adrian looked up at Nina, his carefully constructed walls finally irrevocably crumbling. "This is a very large house for one person," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "It's always been quiet. Too quiet." Nina knelt beside him, her shoulder brushing against his. Together they looked down at their children. Noah the thinker, Chloe the smiler, Owen the grump with a grip of steel. "They make a lot of noise," Nina said with a gentle laugh. Adrian looked at her, at the way the sun caught the light in her hair, at the strength in her eyes, at the family at his feet. A small smile, genuine and unforced, touched his own lips. "I think he said I could get used to the noise." In the quiet of the sun-drenched garden, the billionaire, who had everything discovered, the only thing he had ever truly needed. He hadn't just saved them. In the end, they had saved him. The symphony of his life was no longer one of controlled variables, but was slowly, beautifully being rewritten with the unpredictable and chaotic melody of a lullaby. And so a chance encounter in a park redefined the meaning of wealth, power, and family. Adrian Davenport, a man who commanded boardrooms, learned his greatest strength was in the gentle defense of a life he never expected. Nina Petrov, a woman running from a monster, found her courage, and her voice proving that a mother's love is the most unbreakable shield, their story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures are not the ones we build, but the ones we stumble upon when we least expect it. It shows us that even in a world of cold transactions, the heart is the ultimate asset, and a family in any form is an empire worth fighting for. What did you think of Adrian's transformation? Could you have been as brave as Nina? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give this video a like. Share it with someone who loves a story of hope against all odds. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more tales that will capture your imagination and warm your heart. Thank you for listening.